Well, good morning and welcome to the Backshed Bible Study. Today is Monday, March 21st, 2022. This is episode number 99, and it is good to have you here. Welcome. Today, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome to the Backshed my friend, Nichole Harshbarger. Hello, Nichole. It is so good to see you, to have you here today, and to have you here in the shed with me, so to speak, figuratively.
Yes.
Good to have you here.
Thank you. Hello. How are you?
Fantastic. I second week in a row, or this is my second time doing a backshed recently where I don't have heat on. I have the door open. My dog is faithfully lying here beside me, licking the lawnmower, as she absolutely loves to do when we do this. So
that's perfect.
So Nichole, you are a dear friend. You are a part of Sunrise Community Church. You and your family have been coming to Sunrise for quite a while.
Yeah, since 2011.
Since 2011, so 3 years before I got here. So as far as I know, you've been here 50 years, but no, you're not that old. So
yep, long time.
But I brought you on here today because I believe you have a story that is so worth sharing to the world. And it is a story that shows God's faithfulness. It's a story that shows trials in life. And if any of you were at church yesterday, when we dug deep into Jesus's hard moments in the Garden of Gethsemane and his sweating of blood and his tears as he pleaded to God to take this cup. We talked about hard times. Nichole, you have been through some hard times that you didn't quite plan on. No, not that any of us ever plan on having hard times, but I'd love you to take us right into it. And let's go back to, I believe, November 2019. And I was at church and I got a phone call, and it basically was, come on over to the hospital if you would. So take us there.
Yeah, I was actually in a meeting for Bethlehem Village when my mom called, and she called like 3 times in a row. And finally I was like, okay, I should probably leave the meeting. So I stepped outside, and she was like, could barely breathe. And she's like, your dad's getting in the ambulance. He's had a heart attack. We're going to Mercy right away. And they were at the gym, and he had fallen off of the elliptical machine. And God put an angel right behind him running on a treadmill, and they started CPR right away. It's right there in Carmichael, which is literally like 2 blocks away from the fire station. So they immediately rushed him to Mercy, and I don't even remember the drive straight to Mercy. I just remember I yelled at Allison Hall and said, "Can you take Vanessa?" And I ran as fast as I could and got to the hospital. And you've never prayed so much for a cardiac arrest or a heart attack, because we found out that it was actually a level 5 brain aneurysm, and all of his organs were shutting down, and he was not responsive. And we ended up spending 3 weeks in ICU. He had several brain surgeries, and then transferred to rehab. Came home Christmas Day or Christmas Eve, and but then had a relapse, had another brain surgery right when COVID happened, and was back in ICU for 3 weeks, and then summer. And so it's been a long cycle of recovery. And if you've ever experienced ICU or the ER with doctors, they have certain things. They're trying to be very reportful. They want you understand the severity of it, but also with the sensitivity. And so when they say certain things like, are there any other family members that should be at the ER right now? Or this is really serious. Like when they say things like that, you go, oh, this is like from the movies. This is where people don't make it. So we just prayed like crazy and let the world know, you being one of them. Actually, I think I didn't even let you know. Somebody from the church let you know, and you actually, came, and Pastor Kim came as well and
Right.
prayed over my dad. And that was really what got our family through, was that time. And we as a family, we're very healthy, really no broken arms, like no one. We run marathons, we ski,
Right.
hike, we are just relatively healthy. And my dad, super healthy, he was training to go helicopter skiing. Like you'd never guess that a 62-year-old would fall with a level 5 brain aneurysm.
No,
And no warning.
not at all. Right. And just that really stood out to me, that, someone in his kind of health, that, I mean, and even if you see him today, you're just like, that man is in great health. He's takes care of himself, and you wouldn't have imagined something like that happening to him.
Yeah. So we really had to lean in on just lots of grace and lots of mercy. And my mom navigates things seamlessly. So I watched, kind of helping her navigate. My dad is a doctor, so we had to navigate his practice and getting doctors to relieve his place, so that when he was in the hospital, how much do you tell people? How much do you hold back? And then kind of going through that whole process. And then for me, prayer has always been my immediate. So I spent a lot of times in the chapel when there was nothing going on, or take turns. Thankfully, it was pre-COVID. So my brother, sister-in-law, sister, and mom and I, we just lived in the ICU, and it wasn't an issue. But we would rotate because he'd get overstimulated. And I was always on my knees asking, like, I don't want I don't want to lose my dad. He's like my best friend. I can't do this. And I remember texting a friend, like crying, opening the Bible, like kind of one of those, like, let's just open the Bible and see if a verse pops out that gives you some hope. And I called my friend and I said, I don't want to do this. I want God to take this away. And she just basically said, it's not time for God to take this away. It's time for you to work through this. So, and then we have been dealing with Dad's recovery, and lots of things that went into that, and never would have imagined that 21 months later, God would say, you know what, we're going to do it again. On my anniversary, June 19th, 2021, just a few months ago, my very, very strong husband, who is extremely healthy and can lift a car on his own, like, falls down with a cardiac arrest, and I'm back in ICU for the entire summer. And that was that one, it's one thing when you are standing back as a daughter. It's a whole different thing when you're navigating it as a wife. But I could use that. I'd never been in a hospital, so I was able to use what God showed me with my dad to really help me navigate my husband.
Yeah. So here you've given us a broad overview of the last 2.5 years that is just, I mean, for any of us to even think about handling one of those situations, it's overwhelming, right? But to look at two of those, and I think it's important for everybody out there to understand. Nichole, I years ago, and I back in 1997, when I was working up at Hume Lake, we had a camper who collapsed, and all these things started happening. And an 18-year-old, very healthy girl, we would find out the next day it was a brain aneurysm. And I started to study up and learn a lot of things at that time about how aneurysms worked and all that. And so when this happened with your dad, I'll never forget the day it happened. You said, was that November 19th? No.
Yeah, it was a Sunday. It was that third Sunday before Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I remember heading over to the hospital either that day or the next day. And somehow, again, pre-COVID, everything was way different. Somehow I ended up
in the ICU. Right in.
I ended up in the ICU with your dad when nobody else was there. And I kind of looked around and said, I don't think I'm supposed to be here. Um, and came back out and we found your family. Um, but I knew going in as a pastor and as somebody who had walked through this before with another family, this is a death sentence. A brain aneurysm is really a death sentence. There
Yep.
is very little recovery from that.
Yep.
And 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 then to look back to June 2021, and again, this
Well,
time
and
at your
they,
invitation, I'm in the
it wasn't even mine. I mean, I called you. So they called me. I was at a swim meet with with my son, and my daughter is the one who saw my husband, ran across the street. Neighbor did CPR. We're very close to the fire station. They got him immediately, took him to Roseville Kaiser, and I called you driving probably more than the speed limit allowed,
right,
down 80. But at 7 o'clock in the morning, there was
right,
no traffic, going as fast as I could. And I just said, hey, could you, I mean, you're in my phone, so it's easy. I said, could you just let anyone know to pray? And then I'm in the ER, and I'm squeezing my husband's feet, and there's no heartbeat. He's been on CPR for 40 minutes. There's no brain function. Like, there's just everything shutting down. And when the nurse came up to me and said, are you a believer? And I said, yes. And she said, can I call someone from the church? That was another one of those things that you think of from a movie. And
right,
you think, oh my gosh, they're calling church for me. This is worse than I even thought it was going to be. So the nurse actually called you and said, come on down. Like, you need to get here now.
right,
The day before you're prepping your kids to go to Hume Lake, and you just
right.
dropped everything and
Saturday
came.
morning. And
Yeah.
and again, I walked in there, and as I'm standing there with you and with all the people around and looking at Jake, I'll never forget that moment of the ER doctor who literally just got down on his knees. He took about 2 steps back and he just got down on his knees, and he's just staring, going, you could tell, like, it was almost a God, please give me wisdom. I have no clue. Um, and
Yep.
again, a death sentence.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
He had ended up arrhythmia that caused his heart to stop, and there was no warning signals at all.
so
And
today,
it was day 6 before they said he would live. So I went 6 days. I mean, this is my little shameless plug, in that the
yeah,
day before we had redone our power of attorney, medical attorney, wills, living trust, all of that. It was our anniversary on the 19th. And so on the 18th, we decided that, I mean, we'd already done the process, but on the 18th is when we signed the paper. So I had everything I needed. I knew how Jake would want this to handle out, because literally 24 hours prior, we had signed that paper. So it was 6 days, and they asked for the medical power of attorney, which allowed me to make decisions in the hospital. But it wasn't until day 6 that they used the word discharge. It was before. They're like, minute by minute, they just didn't know, and everything was shutting down. Kidneys, liver, lungs had blood. I mean, it was 1 second at a time. I was just asking people for prayer.
right. Today, both of these men are not just alive.
They went skiing on Friday with me. They are alive and well, and they do have some. So my dad, we did end up having to close his practice, and he does deal with a lot of, brain
Right.
pressure, and some wobbly sometimes. Some days are great, other days, are just more tired days. He'll always have that pressure,
Yeah.
because that's a permanent part of his brain. And then my husband has some numbness in his hands and his feet. And then, just rebuilding all that strength. They say that one day in ICU takes 5 days to recover. So you imagine, my dad was in ICU for 3 stints of 3 weeks, and my husband was in ICU for 27 days. And my husband had a tube in his mouth
Right.
for 16 days. Now, if this had been pre-COVID, they would have done a trach. But post-COVID, they realized that people could be on the ventilators longer. So it was 16 days that he was on a ventilator.
Okay.
But I will say that, the prayer warrior, I always tell people that they were the prayer warriors. I remember day 3, when you're kind of foggy and trying to navigate, everyone wanted to come to the hospital.
Right.
But I knew Jake didn't want that because we had literally discussed that. And I also knew that he wouldn't have wanted anyone to see him in that state. And with COVID, it actually worked out in my favor because it had to be someone designated. So although they may have twisted the rules if I had begged, it just made it easier. And the rooms aren't very big. I mean, even though they're kind of large, there was a lot of equipment that was trying to keep him alive. But people's prayers, at one point I posted and I said, I know everyone wants to help, but I just need you to pray. And that, because for me, I knew that this is huge. I need miracles. I need people to have faith that God is the great physician and will do what needs to. I remember leaving the hospital after 36.5 hours. I was really upset, and I needed to just get upset. Like, I forced myself to, because I knew my brain needed that.
Yeah.
And I got
sure.
upset. And there's a song that played. Leanna Crawford played this song, or sang this song, and it says, right now I'm choosing to believe that someday I'll look back and see that all this pain had a purpose. Your plan is perfect, and this is the truth I'm standing on. And I listened to that song for like 27 days, and I still do. And it brings so much. I just knew that God was telling me, I might take your husband, but he loves you. And I might take your husband, but there is a plan. And so at that point, I just knew my commitment was pray for my husband and let everybody know that regardless of the circumstances, his plan is perfect.
Well, okay. Let's dig into this a little bit, because
yeah.
Conversations like this mess with my theology. I can think certain things and believe certain things about how God works, and then along comes Jake and Nichole Harshbarger, and I'll remember the day of Jake's heart attack and in the ER. You said to me, "I am not losing my husband today." Like, you use those exact words. It's our anniversary. I am not losing him today. And I'm like, I think God listened to you. I didn't know.
Yes, he did.
but let's dig into a little deeper. That was a little tongue in cheek, but that's exactly what you said. But let's dig in a little deeper on just the power of prayer. I mean, your prayer became very vigilant, very intense, very directed, and also you were, you looked at me and you basically said, get people praying. And I'm like, yes, ma'am. Absolutely. We're going to get a lot of people praying. Right. So,
and I think that was huge. People were praying that we will never even know. Churches, right. Full churches, not even in California, were praying for Jake, for this random person that someone knew of that asked, please pray.
Right. Power of social media is huge when you get into times like this, and you find out suddenly there are people all over the world, and the story maybe identifies with someone, and they start praying, and they get more people praying, and it just spreads.
Literally,
right?
Nate and Gra, literally around the world. Nate and Gra
right.
were praying for us. So.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, but I felt like this when last June hit, there was something different in you, because I felt like you had a confidence in God's character and what God had done for your father, and how God had so clearly worked in your father, that with Jake, there it was again, well, I've seen God work and he's going to do it again,
I did. I also wanted it really clear that if God took Jake and it didn't go the way we wanted it to, that the glory was still that God had a plan. That became a little
huge.
bit of a twist. So with my dad,
yeah,
I prayed for healing and, peace for my mom, and just what was going to happen and just life in general, that he would return to a state of life, because with a brain aneurysm, there was a chance that he would live, but live in a vegetative state.
Right.
Or, so many things could have happened. So I was definitely praying for full recovery with my dad. And I did the same with Jake. But at that point, I really felt like I needed people to know that if Jake didn't make it, it was not because God was not there. And I had full confidence that God was listening and being with me, but there was also a really strong feeling in me that I knew that just because God was with me did not mean that he would be a full recovery. And I wanted people to know that that doesn't mean he's not with you, that he does miracles, but the miracle might be that someone came to Christ because of it, not because he lived.
I love that, Nichole. And it really speaks to, again, something that came up in yesterday's message that I got to give at Sunrise. Was we talked about, and I feel like this has come up over and over since Luke even did a message several weeks ago on the Lord's Prayer. But there's that not my will be done, but your will be done. Like, God, I want to pray. And I've started to pray much more like, okay, God, just your will be done. If whatever you're going to do here, let that be what happens here, and not me just trying to, bend your arm or trying to get twist your arm. I got to get my metaphors right. But not me just trying to persuade God and tell him what my will is, but to say, okay, God, I'm going to be good no matter what you do.
But you do still have to do something. I can't just say, God, do your thing. I still had to be like an active person in the, so it is that, God is asking you to trust him, but he's not telling you to just sit there and hope that it figures itself out.
Well,
we
right.
had to be really active in ICU for both my dad and my husband.
Right. Oh my goodness. Right. You probably got, a semester's worth of med school in
they said I was a 1/10 nurse when I left.
Fantastic.
I actually, a very funny, tiny little story. So we are like, he still has the tube in, and we're discussing whether or not it's a trach. It's just me and the doctor and a nurse in there, and a specialist comes in, and they're talking about where to place it, and Jake's kind of sedated a little bit, and he's like going over this process, and I'm like inputting, when things were happened and how the last time they, pulled out the tube and it didn't go well and they had to put it back in, and kind of just explaining it. And then he's like, okay, well, is there like family that I can talk to? And the nurse and the doctor both look at me, and then they look at him, and he goes, well, this is his wife. And he goes, I thought you were a nurse. So my mom definitely is part nurse than I am as well, because you had to learn all the lingo,
right.
And then you needed to be calm enough and intelligent enough that when they did rounds on both cases, that you were justified to ask about. You weren't just some crazy person that was like, why is he taking that med? You had to be like, well, yesterday the doctor took him off that med, so I'm curious why we're upping a dose. Or you just said that his kidneys are failing and he's in level 5 renal failure. Why would you do this procedure that will literally kill his kidneys? So you definitely had to ask questions, but you had to do it in a very calm, respectful manner for them to be able to receive that,
because otherwise they're just blowing you off as though.
Well, yeah, and they have so much going on. Nurses and doctors in a hospital have to make minute by minute, second by second decisions, and a lot of times, and so you really have to be a part of their team, or don't, but be okay with the outcome. So that's why I made it really important. And it's funny because some of the nurses would come in and go, I heard this song. And so they would come in and play a Christian song. And the cardiologist is a Christian, and said, so they were going to move him on day 2. They were going to move him to the Santa Clara cardiology unit. Okay. They were going to fly him there. And I didn't know what any of that meant, but they wouldn't get him in. The Santa Clara cardiology specialist would not take him because they said he won't live. So then day 4, that cardiologist is begging to get Jake in. And they look at the numbers and they're like, why would we take him? He's doing fine.
What's excuse me? What's the timeline of that turnaround? I mean,
well, so his heart by day 3, his heart was back to an EF greater than 55, which is basically normal. And when the cardiologist did the exam in September, Jake goes, what am I like? What do I need to worry about, or what should I do? And she said, go live your 40-year-old life. Just enjoy.
Wow.
So no, literally prayer changed. Prayer is what I firmly believe saved my husband and my dad. Now, yeah. And again, not to say that if you don't have a prayer warrior, it is not going to go that direction. It did for me, but I also felt like that was just their time's not done. They still have people to share, the miracle with.
I believe, having witnessed firsthand what happened there, I agree 100%. Nichole, it was prayer. It was the prayer of not one person, not 20 people, hundreds, if not thousands of people that were praying. And I don't think you willed either your dad or your husband back to health. I think it was so many people submitting themselves, humbling themselves before God and lifting these men before him. And God, in essence says, I've got a bigger plan for this, and sometimes God's plan is exactly what you said to expect. If he is going to pass away, then God, would you please use that, and God will do something through that. I've experienced that firsthand. But sometimes God is going to give a testimony through this. And I will never forget the day that both your dad and your husband were in church.
I had to wheel him in a wheelchair. Yep.
Right.
I saw you make eye contact. And it was my dad sitting next to me, and then Jake was in the wheelchair at that point.
Yeah.
Because he was really weak for a really long time.
And from the platform, I just looked at, I looked down there, and there was just this moment. And I don't always do a great job of hiding my emotions when it comes to that. But I got super emotional, and then multiple times. And then when I see the four of you, your mom and dad and you and Jake standing there next to each other side by side, and and I'll have to go get somebody that wasn't around at the time and go, those are two walking miracles right there. Like, you got to see this. And it's an amazing
God does miracles even if they're little, and sometimes they're really big.
And you've gotten to see
and
the
I
really
was
big
really
ones.
I did never would have ever imagined, because like I said, my life's pretty non-dramatic. But I feel like as Christians, we really need to give the glory back to God for all of that. And so I do know that it is a batch of amazing nurses and doctors at Mercy and Kaiser that, were part of that team.
Oh,
right? But God was the one orchestrating that. There's a harpist that play at Roseville. The harpist will come in and play in ITU. And it was day 2, and she was playing Disney songs, and I kind of leaned over and I said, he kind of hates Disney. So could you play some Christian music, like anything you know? And she plays it as well. And I thought, this could not be more perfect of a song.
Right.
Like, yep. You're puffy, your eyes are closed, you're completely like nothing is working other than he's got 5 devices keeping him. He's got 4 IV towers, and it is well.
It is well. Right. And there is, in the story behind that song,
I know. Yep.
The power of the story behind Horatio Spafford writing that song, a time period after he had lost his wife and kids, or his wife.
His wife was still, she lived, but her kids did not.
Yeah. At sea. And, that he could go back later and just say, no matter what, it is well. One of my favorite songs, the only song I know how to play on the piano, by the way.
It is such a comforting song when you
Yeah.
are in the midst of something and you are uncertain about the ending, or even the finality and don't know how to move forward, because it really does remind you that God still has you in his hands, even amidst uncertainty.
But so here's the thing. And again, the thing that stands out, one thing that stands out to me, um, especially when we were up there at Kaiser, I was blown away at how many Christ followers God had placed around Jake during that time. From the
Yes.
volunteer that,
Yeah, who was praying with me.
right,
Mm-hmm.
to at one point, and as I watched the ER doc, I'm like, I think there's something going on with him, and multiple nurses, and they would just kind of whisper in my ear as pastor, like, I'm a Christian, and we're praying. uh,
Yep.
God surrounded him.
Yeah, he really did. I remember when I walked in and I asked if I could touch his feet, because with the brain aneurysm, too much sensitivity is actually not good for their
Right.
brain connectivity. So we couldn't always touch my dad. We could just be in the room, but we could touch the bed, but not him. And they're like, no, absolutely. And I remember I grabbed his feet and kind of squeezed him, and I said, happy anniversary. And it was like the ER froze. Everyone like looked at me and like they're like, a 39-year-old man with 3 children, and it's our anniversary. We are gonna make him this. Like, everybody was like, this went crazy, and just it is kind of nuts that when you watch those movies and of ER and ICU, how real it does actually
Right.
feel when you're
Yeah.
in that. And especially, I mean, I did it for a very long time, for both my dad and Jake.
Yeah.
I know how those work. And they love
So
chocolate. So if you ever in ER, send chocolate. They
the
love it.
chocolate, right? So there's something to be said also for patient endurance. Um,
Yes.
to walk through that with little sleep. You're thinking about everything you have to manage. You have 3 children at home. Um, trying to figure out how to be sure they're taken care of, how much appropriate information they should know um,
Yeah.
along the way. Do you tell
Yes.
them completely how serious it is? Do you hold back? How did you navigate that?
Well, with my dad, I didn't know I was going to be heading there on the Sunday after church. So I raced there and my phone was almost dead. And I'm texting everyone for my mom. So I asked Jake, I said, could you bring the kids? I'd like to pray in the parking lot of the ER. And I'll let you know everything. And I just told the kids, I was like, I explained the brain aneurysm slightly. And I just said, we really need to pray that God keeps Papa alive. And they brought me a phone charger and food and everything. And I basically lived in the ER, a little room there, and then moved over to ICU for like 11 days with my mom. Every day I would go there. I missed a bunch of school. It happened to be around Thanksgiving, so I could do that a little bit. But yeah, you did. My mom navigated it slightly different because they had a practice, so she
Okay.
didn't want to, give too many details in the beginning, just because we really were uncertain as well. And then you figure you don't want to upset people about things that they don't know. And some people handle stress really well, and others don't. And some people make it about them. And my mom just didn't need any of that. So we were very minimal and just asked for prayer. And it was very vague. With me, I felt it needed to be more specific. So I would intentionally say, please pray that his EF levels on his heart increase, or please
I
pray that dialysis actually
love
works
that.
today. Yeah. So for me, that's how I felt, because that's how I would like to pray. Like, I sometimes do it to you, Pastor Cliff. I say, hey, how can I pray for you today? And I don't want to just say, hey, Lord, bless Pastor Cliff. I want to say, please bless him in all the emails that he has to write after Sunday at church. Like something very intentional and specific. So that's how I navigated it. And then I had an amazing blessing. I'm a camp director, and sadly, my kids can't
Hmm.
always go to Hume because we do a different
You always
camp
have
as a
another camp
music
going
camp.
on.
And sometimes they fall in the same week. And sorry, kids are coming with me because we've been doing it since you were 4 years old. So I was leaving for camp at 1 o'clock on the 19th. So my sister and my best friend had to go to the house, remake Vanessa's bedroom up because it had been kind of destroyed by the fire department. And then they scooped up my daughter and grabbed all the camp stuff, and I navigated camp. My sister did the whole thing with a crew of other people stepping in. While in ICU, I would be on the phone and be like, okay, do this and this and this. And so thankfully for 7 days, my kids were taken care of, and they were in kind of a bubble. They were at camp. They decided they wanted to go. And so my mom took the boys up on the day, the Sunday, and they were at camp, and I didn't have to worry about my children until that following Saturday. And so the good news is by Saturday, they were saying he would live. We don't know what capacity he would live. And so I was able to tell the kids that rather than each day having to navigate the severity of the situation.
And for them to have to live in that tension over those days could have been just absolutely overwhelming. I mean, God's going to carry you through whatever, but you knew for your kids, that's what they needed and you needed. And probably, my guess is for you to be able to manage everything that was going on with Jake, you needed to be there and be present and to have other people that were looking out for your kids. And
they did. I didn't go grocery shopping till like the end of August, because every week someone would fill, and I didn't ask for it, but I did not say no to it. So I didn't ask for all the blessings, but when it was offered, I knew with my mom that sometimes those are really needed. So like we used the last Panera gift card like in December, but we enjoyed it together, and then we prayed for that family that gave us that card, and we text messaged them a picture of the food. Hey,
that's awesome.
So sometimes people don't know how to help. They don't know what to do. So someone offered to mow our lawn, and I'm like, yes, please. So they came over with their lawnmower and mowed our lawn. Like anything, and little blessings like that are miracles in themselves.
Well, and people really want to help. Like that's the thing that you always go back to. I think sometimes, and it's hard when you're in the middle of it, when somebody comes up to you and says, just tell me what I can do, let me know how I can help. And you're just barely surviving with what's right in front of you. The last thing you are able to do is tell a random person that's kind of in a second circle of your life, that's not directly involved with you every day, how they can help. But when people,
and I offer it, take it.
Right.
Because people will do it in the beginning, then it kind of trickles. So that near the end, you might actually be needing more. Like I needed more when the kids got home. And when Jake got home, or my mom needed more help when my dad got home.
Right.
Now you're a caretaker.
You're a caregiver
for someone who,
which is a whole nother conversation for another day. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's, a lot of that, but just accepting that and knowing that when someone's asking to help, it's because they don't know what to do, which is kind of why I kept always pushing people to pray.
Right.
And a few times on my posts, I would mention like, you may not be a prayer warrior, and you may not think that prayer is important, but I know it is. So that's what I need from you. And then people would be like, okay. And I remember my sister-in-law who flew out here to stay at our house to watch our dog and our cat. Like she stayed a week and only got to see her brother one time, but she was willing to do that. I have friends that they're like, I'll set up a meal tray. I'll take your kids to Sunsplash. So they're like, scoop, all those little things. But I had multiple people say, I'm not a huge prayer person, but I prayed more that summer for even not just Jake either. They prayed for other things. They found themselves praying.
It taught them how to pray
in their life.
Yeah. Well, and this is the thing I really encourage people with this is if you see a situation happening and you want to help, like one of the best things you can do, number one is pray. Number two, start to pray specifically. So I started thinking like, what's Nichole going to need? I'm going to pray that when she lays her head down to rest, that she gets sleep, like that she'll actually get sleep. Right. Or, like I'll pray for one of your kids that, as they gather information that's coming in, that God will provide them the capacity to handle that. Like, and people did that with me when our daughter had passed years ago. um I remember starting to tell them, like, I would put out even on Facebook, please pray for Peter specifically in this, as a
Hmm.
2-year-old, here's how. And people would be like, and I, what, one of the reasons it hit me is somebody had come to me and said, Cliff, I want you to know we've been praying for you, but we've taken on Peter as our prayer project through this,
That's awesome.
and I'm like, yes, because some people aren't, I'm not even remembering to pray for Peter sometimes because I'm just trying to struggle
And
with
the whole bit.
or then there's the other of like, how can someone tangibly help? And I encourage people, like, think about something that you love to do or you're good at and help that way. And like you said, the
Yeah.
lawn mowing, like, I can mow a lawn. Like, I may not be good at sitting next to somebody and comforting them, or knowing I am not going to be a good grocery shopper for you. Okay. I'm not going to buy the right kind of groceries that you need, but I could mow your lawn. Right. That's,
Yeah.
and it just, like, think about something that you're already good at, that you enjoy or whatever. And if that service can help someone, do it. Right.
I think it's huge. Yeah. And, we have such a great family at Sunrise, and our
Yeah.
kids, because we've been going there and they're a huge part of the youth group, we had lots of people. So, like, Jesse and Cord took our kids out to fast food one day.
Uh-huh.
Just, I'm going to scoop up all three kids because they knew they were navigating things, that they, I was gone a lot and I had them in all different places. But, yeah, just offering that specific thing does make a huge difference, especially when someone's in need. And it could be a long-term need, and you might have forgotten. Like, maybe there's someone that had something that happened 2 years ago, but they still might need something. So if you think about them, it's good to just let them know that I'm still praying for you.
Well, yeah. So here we are. I'm looking down at who's making comments today as we're talking along, and there are so many people on here who have walked through hard times. So Micah Paul is on here, and they had this last year. I mean, same time frame as you guys. Um,
Yeah.
and we actually had Micah McKenzie here on Backshed while from the hospital. um and
Their
in
cars were at the hospital when we were there. We
Really?
saw cars. Yes. Yep. Because I
So
would walk the hospital.
right. And so one of the things I love that he's Micah's like, hey, you nailed it, offering specific help is the best. And then Nichole, you said something a minute ago. It's um that long-term help and that long-term prayer. And so, Jake gets home, and or Micah McKenzie, you guys get home, and you're getting back settled, and everybody now, since you're out of the hospital, you're like, okay, the big hump is passed, and we got over that hump, they're going to live, everything's going to be okay. And um and then we you're getting into the regular everyday life, and suddenly, like, you're not on the forefront of other people's minds anymore, and yet you still have, like you had said, when you get home, some of the needs are much greater that kick in.
Yeah.
So those people that a month, 2 months, 3 months down the road, 6 months down the road are going, I'm going to keep helping, I'm going to keep praying, I'm
Yeah.
going to bring you a meal, I'm going to mow your lawn, whatever. Like, to just say, we're still here, you still matter, and we realize this is a long haul thing, not a short term.
Yeah. Absolutely. It
Yeah.
does. I know that now, that being like, I've always been the giver of the meals and the grocery shopping.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I've always done. And now that I'm the receiver, I actually think of it even differently.
Mm.
Like, yeah, I'm not going to be the one that does it when the emergency hits. I'm going to put a message in my phone and do it 6 months later.
Right.
And that's when I'm going to do it. Or a gift card to something that they could then use later. Because now I know that as a receiver, sometimes it's so much in the beginning, which is so wonderful and grateful, especially in that immediate need.
Right.
But yeah, sometimes it is the later part that you go, just a few weeks ago, Jason played the Phil Wickham's Battle Belongs to Me,
Yeah.
or to You. And I prayed that song so many times because I said, I will fight this on my knees. Like, I see a mountain, but you see it moved. And even just, we're rounding around the corner to the 1 year anniversary, and I'm planning for camp again. I open it up and it's all the 2019 things or 2021 things that I didn't get to do, but I planned for.
Yeah.
And I had to shut my computer. I had to be like, not today. We'll do it tomorrow. So yeah, you just, you think about those kinds of things, just checking in with someone that saw a miracle, or maybe it didn't go the way they planned and they might just need some encouragement.
Right. And, I even think about when April and I got married, and you had those people that like went the full 6 months before they sent you a gift. And I'm like, I loved those gifts that came in 6 months later, right? Like, that's awesome.
Yep. Yeah.
Yep,
absolutely.
I cannot believe how quickly our time has passed here.
I know. So right, we got God is good all the time. He has miracles. Trust in him. Both.
That's it. No, that's it. And he never changes. And sometimes the miracle happens in the strangest way that you would never imagine. And sometimes it is not the miracle you prayed for, and yet it's the miracle that God provides. And I can say this, I think you and I, Micah, Eddie, so many other people on here.
So many.
I'm looking down. I have a future guest on the back shed that's watching along today too, in D, in what you walked through. Sometimes God is, you're closest to God, and you see him in the richest color when you're in the deepest, hardest despair. And he is more real than ever before. And there are times when life is going easy, and you miss that. You miss
gets
that.
All the glory, for sure.
Yeah. So absolutely. I am so glad we got to do this, Nichole.
Me too.
I wish we could go on.
You're
forever.
a huge part of both, so.
Right?
Yeah.
we could go on forever, but I'm gonna let you enjoy your day off, and we have other things to do here in the family. But thank you. I do want to thank you, so many of you jumping on in your comments today. This obviously struck a chord today with so many of us, and that's the thing. Suffering is a very real theme in every one of our lives, and yet with the hope of Jesus Christ and the healing that he brings, it is we can truly say it is well, right?
Yeah, it is. Can we pray really fast for
Let's
anyone
do it.
suffering that needs? Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to do it? Okay.
I do. Father, in the name of Jesus, we thank you, God, for your faithfulness, Lord. I praise you, God. I praise you as I have watched two miracles happen right before my eyes, that you chose to spare the lives of these men that love you, and Lord, I even look at them and how they have been drawn closer to you through it all. And I thank you for the faith of Nichole as a daughter and as a wife, to walk through this, Lord. And I pray that her testimony and this story would impact the lives of so many people, even through our time this morning here. And God, as always, would you just be completely honored? Would you be glorified through it? May this be about you, not about Nichole, not about her dad or her husband, and God, but may it be about you and who you are. You are a good, faithful, loving, sovereign God, and we praise you in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
This is fun, and this was really cool. And thank you so many that joined along today. Great interaction with the people following along on Facebook Live. Let you all know in the coming weeks, hopefully next week, we'll see how it goes. This right here is a book that was compiled by Dan Knoin in our own church in Sunrise, and it is called "Useful to the Master." It is a book full of, I believe, 365 daily devotionals that Dan has written over the years and compiled into book form. And we're going to get Dan on here, and we're going to talk about his life and what I would call a faithful, someone who is a faithful follower of Christ, and let you know how you can get a hold of this as well. So you might notice on the cover, those are the plans for Sunrise Community Church when they built the lobby. Down below or an actual picture of it happening in the process. I've learned how to say process ever since Luke's been around. All right, I think that is it. Nichole, let's say goodbye to everybody. We'll see you all next week. God bless you. Have a great week, and see you later.